During October, I spent a lot of time playing many different games, so this video isn't going to be the games I played in October 2023. It's going to be the best games, the most interesting games, and the games that I most want to talk about, from the wide selection of things that I played in October 2023. And because there's so many games, I'm not going to be talking about any of the titles which I discussed in my September episode, which means no Armored Core 6, Torchlight Infinite, or Path of Exile, even though I did end up playing a little bit of each of those games in the early part of the month. So if you want to know about any of those titles, maybe check out what I played in September after this. And if you want to see what I play in November, then do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there. With that said, let's get into it, starting with the first game that I played in October 2023, which is Hero Siege's 2.0 update. This one was a massive disappointment for me, because I'd always heard that Hero Siege was a charming indie game with pixel art and really fun ARPG gameplay. What I got was a very clunky, janky game. And after spending some time playing, then talking to a few people who had played for a lot longer, I found out this is because Hero Siege 2.0 completely changed the game. And that raises an interesting question. Is it okay for a game to be something completely different now than what it was in the past, where you can buy a game, play it for months, or possibly even years, and then suddenly the developer flips a switch, and all of a sudden it's a completely different game? I think, on the one hand, if it's a live service and sold as such, you know it's going to change over time. But on the other, most indie games aren't live services, and quite often there's no expectation for updates, never mind for the game to change entirely. So it definitely feels a little bit weird to me. If you want to know more about my thoughts on Hero Siege 2.0, then check out my Worst ARPG Ever Hero Siege 2.0 video. And yes, that Worst ARPG Ever is a series, and the next episode's going to come sometime in November. Now, continuing on with things that were in some ways disappointing, I also tried Assassin's Creed Mirage, and I went into this with very few expectations. Ubisoft promised that it was a return to form, to be more like the old Assassin's Creed titles, and in some regards, it absolutely was. I was quite refreshed to go back to the stealth gameplay, rather than it just kind of being an action combat brawler where you often button mash to win and worried about enemies that are higher level than you. And I would have loved to see an Assassin's Creed Mirage, which felt truly modern, where the stealth mechanics involved far more reactive and intelligent NPCs. Let's say over the course of a game they learn that you tend to sit on rooftops throwing knives at people, because early in the game that's a really effective tactic. All of a sudden you'd find more archers. Guards would look up more often, and there'd be patrols along the rooftops. Maybe they'd even go so far as to remove obstructions or things where you could hide, that way forcing you to change up your tactics and approach your stealth in a different way. Maybe if a body's found, the guards don't just look around half-heartedly for a little bit. If more than one guard goes missing and the body is discovered, they actually sound the alarm, call in reinforcements, and do a grid-by-grid search, which would again be really interesting. Maybe they call in heavy armored guys that are honestly pain to fight, especially when, because they're on alert, you can't just stealth past and stab them in the neck. But these are all the things that I didn't get to experience in Assassin's Creed Mirage, because that isn't really what Assassin's Creed Mirage was. When Ubisoft said it was a return to form, it felt more like they were trying to remake Assassin's Creed 1 than make a new game that iterated on the formula. And for me personally, at least when I compare it to Valhalla, Odyssey, or even Origins, I do think this is a step in the right direction. Though if you want my full thoughts on Assassin's Creed Mirage, then I do have a full review that I'll link up in the card and down below. But the next game I want to talk about is a redemption story, and that's Diablo 4 Season of Blood. Diablo 4 was off to a strong start. Sure, the game had some flaws, but it was pretty darn fun, and a lot of people hopped in, tried D4, and enjoyed it. But then Season 1 came along, and it felt like Blizzard made mistake after mistake, and in typical Blizzard fashion, they not only spilled some milk while trying to knock down their dominoes, but then instead of cleaning it up, they dropped the entire bottle, so you now have milk, dominoes, and glass everywhere. It was a gigantic mess. So the Season of Blood largely went to fixing those problems. They improved the leveling experience, allowing you to get to level 100 much faster than before. They added new endgame bosses that you can use to farm unique items. This fixes an issue where you'd want to play something like, let's just say, Tornado Druid, but you wouldn't be able to farm the uniques for it. You just have to hope it drops eventually. And if the item doesn't drop before your patience for Diablo 4 without that item expires, well, then you're probably going to go play Path of Exile or anything else where you can just go buy the item from trade, because while you can trade rare items in D4, you can't trade uniques. In short, they've done a lot to improve the game, and the early game feels much better. It was a genuinely enjoyable experience to level. Now, part of this was because I was leveling with a purpose. I don't think I'd have that much fun if I was leveling aimlessly, but I did have a purpose. And then, in the mid-game, it was also an enjoyable experience. Now, this is kind of a side effect of making the game much easier. At this point, I wouldn't say Diablo 4 is a challenging game or a game that you play for the challenge. It's also still lacking post-100 content, and does tend to get repetitive after you've played it for a couple weeks, or maybe less if you're playing a ton every day. And yeah, in comparison to Path of Exile, if you're looking to play D4 for builds, then you're barking up the wrong tree. Which is to say, a lot of the flaws D4 had are still flaws in the game. But it's improved a lot from its previous state, and I was surprised at how much fun I had when I did come back. Instead, it's much more of an arcade game, where you go in, you kill some dudes, you fight some vampires, make the numbers get bigger, and at the end of the day, you're pretty darn happy. In that regard, the new Vampiric Zone is actually pretty good. It's highly dense, and the only complaint I have is it makes Helltide look a little bit, sparse by comparison. I'd love to see that equal level of density and monster variety in the Helltides in the future, with a bunch more demons popping out of the ground, and all that sort of fun stuff. Maybe even little mini-games with bosses, kind of like you have with the Bloodseekers. Furthermore, the endgame bosses are, well, thematically interesting, but unfortunately tuned such that they're honestly quite easy. But honestly, maybe that's okay. Because it's all well and good to have an interesting and challenging boss battle when you need to fight that boss once, and after you beat them, you've won. However, if you need to fight that boss 50 or 100 times to farm your items, maybe it's not so exciting that it's an epic battle. Maybe you just want to kill it in a few seconds and get things over with. In which case, the bosses in Diablo 4 are absolutely perfect. And since they drop 925 items, they're a valuable part of the gearing process, not just for uniques. Speaking of, if you're ever wondering, can you get any of the Uber uniques? Yes, Duriel the King of Maggots drops Uber uniques. And while it isn't common enough that I have any, it's common enough that a friend of mine has 3 and he's probably only got like 50-60 kills. So either he is extremely lucky, it's not that bad to get them, or maybe both can be true at once. It was certainly fun enough that I came back to the game, played for a few weeks, and generally speaking did enjoy my time. I'll try to leave some videos I made down below so you can check out my thoughts for yourself. Now, something else I did this month is check out Steam Next, where there's a whole bunch of different indie demos, and you get to try games across a wide variety of genres. I love Steam Next for 2 reasons. Number 1, there are some awesome indie games that I would never have known of or purchased if it wasn't for these Steam Next demos. And number 2, I like trying different stuff, and this is a way to try different stuff without buying a game and then not really liking it but being passed with a Steam refund, and then kind of sunk cost going through the game and being a little bit unhappy about it. The first game I tried was Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, which is a bullet heaven game, or a game similar to Vampire Survivors, set in the Deep Rock Galactic universe. And oh my god, it is so fun! I think I spent half of my total playtime across all of the Steam Next demos just playing this over and over, which is kind of sad when you think about the fact that you can only play one character and it's only one level, and I still kept going back. I cannot recommend this strongly enough. It's coming out in Q1 2024, and I'm 100% going to buy it when it does. Not only is it a bullet heaven game, which I quite like, they do a really good job of keeping to the Deep Rock Galactic flavor and lore. So if you're at all familiar, even vaguely, it's going to feel natural. Plus, you're a dwarf, which means mining resources and tunneling through terrain to either escape or funnel enemies is a part of the gameplay. Oh, and also after you beat the boss and complete the level, you have to get to your pod to escape, just like in regular Deep Rock Galactic. Otherwise, they're going to leave you behind. Because, come on, man, corporations don't care about you. You're just dwarf number 5432. They're going to leave you behind and pay dwarf 5433 a little bit more. Or maybe a little bit less, because they'll tell them, hey, job opening. It's a competitive market. You have to do the job cheaper. So if you like Vampire Survivors, you like Deep Rock Galactic, you like Bullet Heaven games, I can't recommend this enough. Also, I'll link to a video giving some of my first impressions down in the comments below, and I strongly advise that you check it out, either before or after finishing this video. Honestly, this point in the game is so awesome that I don't even care if you finish this video. But the second title that I played and wanted to talk about was Enshrouded, which is an open-world survival game with crafting that's entering early access. And it has a lot of what you would expect, which means it's probably going to compete with the Lord of the Rings Return to Moria, aka Dwarf Moria game. But the cool part that I found about Enshrouded is there are areas covered in the shroud. It's kind of these weird zombie mushroom monsters, and the spores in the air slowly erode your sanity, your health, something. I'll be honest, I didn't pay that much attention to the lore. All I know is when the mushroom stuff kills things, it grows spores, which is bad. You can harvest some of the spores to make better stuff, and if you spend too much time in the bad place, you get scary warnings, so I didn't do that. I do think it's interesting when a survival game adds more than just a timer because you're hungry and thirsty. Timers where you're hungry and thirsty tend to be what I consider maintenance timers. In a game like Don't Starve Together, for example. It's just an annoyance that you very often have to deal with, where it's fairly rare that that's what actually bricks your run. Whereas timers from you interacting with things or exploring are far more interesting. Think of this as oxygen when diving, getting too cold in Don't Starve Together, or delving into the shroud in Enshrouded. The timer is honestly pretty reasonable, starting out at around 5 minutes, and you can increase it with elixirs. So I don't think it's too punishing in that regard, but it's also cool and adds a lot to the gameplay. Speaking of, there's two other elements of Enshrouded which caught my eye. First, Enshrouded is more PvE focused than PvP focused, which I personally really like. I know people love their Ark and their Rust and their PvP and survival games, but that's not really why I play them. I'd much rather get a server together with friends than go deal with random people, half of which are probably going to be griefers. The other pretty cool thing about Enshrouded is it has an almost voxel-like deformable terrain system, which I discovered completely by accident and found to be really cool. I didn't actually try to make any underground cave bases, but that sounds pretty darn awesome, or maybe I'm just thinking of a dwarf game from earlier. Either way, Enshrouded is coming out soon, and if you like survival games, you should check out my video that's linked down below. The next title that I checked out is one of those I didn't know I needed this in my life games, and that is Dungeons 4. It's a hybrid base-building RTS game that has a really cheesy and campy story. And I love it because the narrator is completely self-aware and quite annoyed at the characters the entire time. While the characters might be cheesy and campy, the narrator is great. 10 out of 10. And I like that the game doesn't take itself all that seriously.
These sequences with me in a cage are being stretched out far too long here. Can't we talk this out somehow? Maybe rock, scissors, paper, like in the old days?
Huh. You know I always go for the good old rock. But speaking of stones, I will soon have all the stones of Finichu together, and then...
Nobody gives a damn about your stupid marbles, you dumbass.
While Tanya was engrossed in an animated discussion with her stepbrother, the brain-eating evil was already attempting a, more or less, fruitless attempt to free her.
You're just kind of laughing along with the jokes as you're killing dozens of innocent people, and oh god, are we really the bad guy? Yes, we are really the bad guy. So you command various baddies like, the usuals you'd find, orcs and goblins, undead, and even demons, to destroy the forces of good. You start by building your base, but as your base gets stronger and stronger, as your dungeon gets filled out with more and more traps, you can send your forces into the overworld to destroy the bases belonging to the good guys, and if you destroy them, you win the level. I was surprised at how fun Dungeons 4 was, and it's definitely on my radar now, not only as a game to play, but as an entire series to play. So don't be surprised if a video shows up soon with my first impressions, possibly followed by some more gameplay videos after it comes out, though I'll have to see if I have time. This one could go on the backlog and I'll catch up with it later. The last game that I want to talk about, which I played the demo for during Steam Next, was Ghostrunner 2, a really cool cyberpunk ninja action game. My initial experience was pretty awkward, where I thought, oh man, I wish I was better at this game. And after beating the tutorial, I almost uninstalled it there and said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to talk about this one because I'm really bad at it and I'm kind of embarrassed. But then I decided, you know what, let's try it one more time. Let's play through, see if I actually improved at all. And I was surprised at how quickly I got into the flow state and absolutely crushed it on the rerun. I think my initial run through the tutorial took almost an hour. Now, part of that was because I was recording segments and providing commentary, which does slow down the process. But for comparison, my second run through took like 15-16 minutes, and I also had 1/5 of the deaths. So I definitely improved a lot. If you like speedrunning, or you thought Neon White was awesome, I suspect this is going to be pretty similar. Neither of those things are really my jam, so I don't know if I'm going to pick up the game. But it was a genuinely awesome feeling to go through thinking, oh, I'm so bad at this, what am I doing? And then play through again and realize, hey, actually, maybe I'm not as bad as I thought. Maybe I'm actually pretty good at it. Then immediately fall off a cliff because pride always comes before the fall. Either way, Ghostrunner 2 demo was pretty fun, and I'm going to keep an eye on it, probably pick it up through Humble or on a sale in the future. Now, while those weren't all the games I played as a part of Steam Next, those were certainly the highlights. I'll be sure to leave several other videos for things I checked out down below, along with a rough idea of their genres, so you know what might interest you. And then, towards the very end of October, I played a game that took over the last few days. That is Backpack Battles. Now, this game had been described to me about a week previously, and I was like, that doesn't really sound like my kind of deal, because it had been described as an idle game or auto battler. Then I watched Ziggy D actually playing it and realized, oh, it's nothing like that at all. While yes, your character does automatically fight when you get to the combat stage, the really important part is the character building stage. The whole idea is you're either a ranger or a reaper, think witch or damage over time kind of stuff, and you have a backpack full of items that you need to use to complete your adventure. Witches beat 10-ish other adventurers for some unknown reason. I don't know if the game has story, I genuinely don't care. I just want to put all the stuff in my backpack, make my backpack bigger, and then fight more people. At first, I had no idea what I was doing, and I just kind of place things randomly and go, oh, well, I'm winning, so I must be doing it right. As I progressed, though, I noticed the game has a really good way of introducing several systems. Whenever you mouse over or select an item, if it can be combined with another item that you have or another item in the shop, you get a little blue line. And when it's placed so that it's compatible with that item, the line turns gold. So you automatically know recipes pretty intuitively just by playing the game. The shop itself is fairly straightforward. Items that are on sale are half price. You can pretty much always buy these because you can sell them to the Mimic and get your money back later. If you buy an item at full price, well, if you don't end up using it, you'll lose half your money. And you can pull the golden bell to then reset the shop. I really like this touch here. There's just something nice about having to physically pull down on something, or I guess click and move your mouse down, as opposed to just click a button and it automatically happens. It's a really cool way to add a "are you sure" to the shop so that people don't reset it by accident, while also just making it feel a little bit more real. Something else that's really neat is many of the items have synergies with each other, so you want to place certain things in certain types of backpacks or adjacent to each other. There's little stars that start out blue to indicate where it can influence stuff and then turn gold when it's actually influencing stuff. There's also little green diamonds that do pretty much the same thing but for different types of bonuses. Then you have all sorts of stats like accuracy, debuffs like poison, and resources like mana. Overall, it's a really neat indie title, and there's even a ranked mode, which means you can spend way too much time playing and getting that ranked grind on. I don't actually know if there's leaderboards or rewards for ranking up or anything like that, but there's a rank ladder, so I'm gonna climb it. Right now the game is essentially in beta. It's completely free to download and try the demo, which is really neat, and I'm sure the developers are getting a lot of great feedback. We've already done at least one balance pass since I started playing, and there's 2 more characters that are promised to come, with I think either the full release or early access version of the game that's coming sometime soon. So a lot to look forward to, and honestly, it's a pretty darn fun game. If you're wondering, yeah, I'm probably going to have a video at some point in the near future. But those were the best games that I played in October 2023, or at the very least, the ones where I thought I wanted to say a little bit more about them. And so with that said, I'm curious, did you play any of the games that I played in October? And if so, what are your thoughts? If you didn't play any of these games, what might you want to see me play in November? Be sure to leave those recommendations or suggestions down in the comments below. Of course, if you want something else to watch, then check out any of the videos that I mentioned previously. Whether it's my worst ARPG ever, Hero Siege 2.0, Assassin's Creed Mirage review, or some of my rave thoughts about Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. Links to all of those and more will be up in the card and down below. Of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible. And for about $5 a month, you can see your name in the credits, just like these fine folks here. And if you want to see what I'm going to play in November, then I guess you'll just have to get subscribed and check back in about a month. Though you'll probably get some spoilers if you watch my videos both on the main channel and second channel over the upcoming weeks. With that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again sometime soon.